Captain Jake Morrison checked his weapon for the third time that morning. The plasma rifle felt solid in his hands, a familiar weight that brought him comfort. He stood outside Princess Lyra's quarters aboard the diplomatic ship Starlight Dawn, watching the corridor with sharp eyes. 3 years of protecting the young alien princess had taught him to trust his instincts, and today something felt wrong. The Valdorian princess was unlike anyone Jake had ever met. Her people were tall and graceful, with silver skin that seemed to glow from within. They were healers and philosophers, a race that had forgotten how to make war centuries ago. Princess Lyra was 23 in human years, though she looked much younger. Her large violet eyes held wisdom that came from growing up in a peaceful world where violence was almost unknown. Jake came from a very different place. He had grown up in the rough streets of New Detroit, where you learned to fight or you died young. His father had been a firefighter who died saving kids from a burning building. His mother worked as a nurse in the worst parts of the city. They had taught him that protecting others was more important than protecting yourself. The ship shook slightly as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. They had arrived at Kepler 442b, a mining world on the edge of civilized space. The princess was here to negotiate a peace treaty between the miners and the local government. It should have been a simple diplomatic mission, but Jake had learned that simple missions often turned dangerous very quickly. "Captain Morrison," came a soft voice from behind him. Princess Lyra stepped out of her quarters, wearing the formal robes of her office. The purple fabric seemed to flow like water around her tall frame. "Are you ready for today's meetings?" Jake nodded. "Yes, Your Highness. But I want to go over the security arrangements one more time. This planet has been having problems with separatist groups. They don't like the central government, and they really don't like diplomats." The princess smiled, an expression that could calm the angriest person. "You worry too much, Jake. These are just miners and farmers. They want peace as much as anyone else." "That's what worries me," Jake said. "Desperate people do desperate things. And from what I've read, these folks are pretty desperate." They made their way to the ship's landing bay where the shuttle waited. The Valdorian guards looked impressive in their shining armor, but Jake knew they were more for show than actual protection. They carried energy shields and stun weapons, tools meant to stop fights rather than win them. In a real battle, they would be helpless. The shuttle ride down to the planet's surface was quiet. Jake studied the landscape through the small windows. Kepler 442b was a brown and gray world, covered in strip mines and industrial cities. The air was thick with dust and smoke from the mining operations. It was the kind of place where life was hard and people had little patience for fancy diplomats from peaceful worlds. The landing pad was surrounded by prefabricated buildings that had seen better days. A small crowd had gathered to watch the shuttle land. Jake didn't like the look of some of the faces in that crowd. Too many angry expressions, too many people trying to hide their emotions. As they stepped off the shuttle, Jake stayed close to Princess Lyra. The local officials greeted them with polite words, but he could see the tension in their body language. The miners' representatives looked even worse. They were dirty, tired men who had worked hard their entire lives and had little to show for it. The meeting was held in a large warehouse that had been cleaned up for the occasion. Tables and chairs had been arranged in a circle, with Princess Lyra sitting between the government officials and the miners' leaders. Jake positioned himself where he could watch all the entrances and keep an eye on everyone in the room. For the first hour, everything went well. Princess Lyra spoke about compromise and understanding. She offered trade agreements and medical supplies. The miners listened politely, but Jake could see they were not impressed. They wanted immediate changes, not promises of future help. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a few seconds later, casting everything in a red glow. Jake was already moving before the first explosion shook the building. He grabbed Princess Lyra and pulled her toward the emergency exit, but armed figures were already blocking their path. "Nobody moves!" shouted a man in mining gear. He carried an old but functional assault rifle. "This is now under the control of the Free Kepler Liberation Front." Jake counted at least 12 armed separatists, probably more outside. The Valdorian guards were reaching for their weapons, but they moved too slowly. These weren't trained soldiers. They were diplomats pretending to be warriors. The lead separatist pointed his rifle at Princess Lyra. "Your people have ignored us for too long. Today that changes. Today you learn what it means to suffer." Jake stepped in front of the princess without thinking. The movement was automatic, trained into him through years of combat experience. The separatist's rifle swung toward him instead. "You want to hurt her? You go through me first," Jake said quietly. The separatist leader laughed. "One human against all of us? You're either very brave or very stupid." "Probably both," Jake admitted. "But that's never stopped me before." The first shot came from outside the building. Then the windows exploded inward as more separatists poured through. Jake pushed Princess Lyra behind an overturned table and opened fire. His plasma rifle cut down 2 attackers before they knew what hit them. The Valdorian guards tried to fight back, but they were overwhelmed in seconds. Their stun weapons were useless against enemies wearing heavy armor. Their energy shields failed under concentrated fire. Within minutes, Jake was the only one still fighting. He moved from cover to cover using his knowledge of human military tactics against enemies who had never faced a real soldier. The separatists had numbers and position, but they fought like miners and factory workers. They bunched up too much, exposed themselves too often, and wasted ammunition on targets they couldn't see. But there were too many of them, and they kept coming. For every one Jake killed, 2 more took his place. His plasma rifle overheated and failed. He switched to his backup pistol, then to a rifle taken from a dead enemy. Still, they kept coming. A plasma bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around and sending him crashing into a wall. Pain shot through his entire body, but he forced himself to keep moving. Princess Lyra was counting on him. He had given his word to protect her, and Jake Morrison never broke his word. Blood ran down his arm as he reloaded and continued fighting. The separatists were getting closer to Princess Lyra's position. He had to stop them, no matter what it cost him. Another energy blast hit him in the chest, driving him to his knees. The world started to go gray around the edges, but he could still see the princess watching him with those large violet eyes. She looked afraid, not for herself, but for him. Jake smiled at her and raised his weapon one more time. As long as he was breathing, no one would touch her. That was a promise, and he intended to keep it. The rescue ships arrived 6 hours after the fighting began. When the Valdorian military forces finally broke through the separatist lines, they found something that would be talked about across the galaxy for years to come. Captain Jake Morrison lay unconscious in a pool of his own blood, surrounded by the bodies of 43 enemy fighters. Princess Lyra knelt beside him, her hands glowing with healing energy as she fought to keep him alive. The human had taken 17 direct hits from energy weapons. His left arm was shattered, his chest was burned, and he had lost enough blood to kill 3 normal men. But somehow, impossibly, his heart was still beating. The medical team that carried him to the ship had never seen anyone survive that much damage. Dr. Kane Williams, the ship's human medical officer, worked for 18 straight hours to save Jake's life. The Valdorian healers helped with their advanced technology, but they were amazed by what they discovered. The human body, they learned, was capable of surviving trauma that would kill most other species. More importantly, the human mind was capable of forcing that body to keep fighting long after it should have given up. "I don't understand it," Dr. Williams told Princess Lyra as they watched Jake sleep in the medical bay. "By every law of biology, he should have died in the first 10 minutes of that fight. But he kept going for 6 hours. I've never seen anything like it." Princess Lyra had spent those 6 hours hiding behind an overturned table, watching Jake fight impossible odds to protect her. She had seen him fall again and again, only to get back up and continue fighting. Every time the Separatists got close to her position, Jake would appear like an angry ghost to drive them back. "He told me once that his father died saving children from a fire," she said softly. "His mother spent her life helping sick people in dangerous places. I think dying for others is just what humans do." The news of the battle spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. The Valdorians, impressed by Jake's sacrifice, shared the security recordings with their allies. Soon, every major civilization had copies of the footage, showing a single human holding off an entire army to protect one alien princess. The reactions were immediate and intense. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium, masters of galactic business, began studying human psychology to understand what drove such irrational loyalty. They wanted to know if this quality could be bought, sold, or copied. Their economists ran countless simulations trying to put a price on the kind of devotion Jake had shown. The Thorian military hegemony, respected throughout the galaxy for their strategic brilliance, requested detailed analysis of Jake's combat performance. Their generals studied every move he made, every decision he took during those 6 hours of fighting. They had never seen tactics like his before, because they had never seen someone fight with such complete disregard for personal safety. Even the mysterious ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who rarely paid attention to physical matter, took notice of humanity's unique emotional patterns. They sent observers to study this new species that seemed to possess qualities their advanced mathematics couldn't explain. On board the medical ship, Jake slowly recovered from his wounds. The Valdorian healing technology was far beyond anything humans possessed, but even with their help, he would carry scars for the rest of his life. Princess Lyra visited him every day, bringing food and conversation as he regained his strength. During these quiet hours, Jake told her about his life on Earth. He described the crowded cities where millions of humans lived packed together, somehow managing to care for each other despite their differences. He talked about his neighborhood in New Detroit, where gang violence was common, but people still looked out for their neighbors' children. "Your people have everything," Jake said during one of their conversations. "Advanced technology, perfect health, beautiful cities, but you've forgotten something important. You've forgotten how to fight for something bigger than yourselves." Princess Lyra was puzzled by this. "We are a peaceful people. We solve problems through discussion and compromise. Why would we need to fight?" Jake was quiet for a long time before answering. "Because some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for. Your people have been safe for so long that you've forgotten what those things are." "What things?" she asked. "Each other," Jake said simply. "Family, friends, innocent people who can't protect themselves. The idea that everyone deserves a chance at happiness. Back on Earth, we call it love, but it's bigger than that. It's the willingness to suffer so others don't have to." Princess Lyra began to understand that Jake represented something her advanced civilization had lost in their evolution toward peace and perfection. They had eliminated war, poverty, and disease, but in doing so, they had also eliminated the bonds that made people willing to sacrifice for each other. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, other species were reaching similar conclusions about humanity. The Corvin Defense Fleet, protectors of the Outer Rim territories, sent delegations to Earth requesting military advisors. They had watched the battle recordings and realized that human soldiers might possess qualities their own warriors lacked. The Academic Council of Zerion, a group of scholar philosophers who had spent centuries studying different forms of consciousness, declared that humanity represented a new type of intelligence, not superior in terms of raw processing power or technological advancement, but unique in their ability to transcend logical self-interest in favor of emotional connections. News reports about the human guardian became the most watched broadcasts in galactic history. Children of a dozen different species learned Jake's name in their schools. Poets wrote songs about the Battle of Kepler 442b. Military academies added courses on human combat psychology to their standard curriculum. But the most significant reaction came from the furthest reaches of space, where the ancient Cytherian Empire monitored all galactic communications. Queen Zarina, ruler of the most powerful civilization in known space, watched the battle recordings with growing fascination. The Cytherians had achieved near immortality through advanced biotechnology. They had conquered death, disease, and aging. Their empire spanned thousands of star systems and controlled resources beyond imagination. But they had lost something in their quest for perfection, something that the human in those recordings still possessed. Queen Zarina called her advisors to an emergency meeting. The holographic displays in her throne room showed tactical analyses of Jake's fighting style, psychological profiles of human behavior, and economic projections of what this new species might mean for galactic politics. "This human fought for 6 hours against impossible odds," the Queen said to her council. "Our soldiers would have retreated after the first casualty. Our logic circuits would have calculated the futility and recommended surrender. But this creature ignored logic entirely and chose to fight anyway." "Your Majesty," said General Thexani, her chief military advisor, "surely this is just an anomaly. One individual cannot represent an entire species." Queen Zarina studied the recordings again, focusing on Jake's face during the moments when he should have given up. She saw something there that her people had lost long ago, the willingness to choose suffering over surrender, death over dishonor. "Send a message to the Valdorian territories," she commanded. "I wish to meet this human who has redefined courage for an entire galaxy. Perhaps he has something to teach us about what we have forgotten." The message would take weeks to reach Princess Lyra's ship, but when it arrived, it would change everything. The most powerful being in the galaxy wanted to meet the man who had taken every blow for a princess and survived to tell about it. The message from Queen Zarina arrived 3 weeks after Jake had recovered enough to leave the medical bay. Princess Lyra was in her study when the quantum communication array lit up with the distinctive gold and silver pattern that marked official correspondence from the Cytherian Empire. She had never received a direct message from the Queen before. Few beings in the galaxy had that honor. Jake was in the ship's training room, slowly rebuilding his strength after his injuries. The Valdorian doctors had done amazing work, but his human body still needed time to fully heal. He was running on a treadmill when Princess Lyra found him, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and concern. "Jake, you need to see this," she said, holding out a crystalline datapad that glowed with soft light. "Queen Zarina wants to meet you." Jake stopped running and wiped sweat from his face. He had heard of the Cytherian Queen, of course. Every being in the galaxy knew her name. She ruled an empire that spanned half the known universe and had lived for over 1,000 years. Her people had technology that seemed like magic to most other species. "Why would someone like that want to meet someone like me?" Jake asked. Princess Lyra activated the message crystal, and Queen Zarina's voice filled the small training room. The voice was beautiful, carrying harmonics that made Jake's spine tingle, but there was something else in it, something that sounded almost like sadness. "Princess Lyra of the Valdorian territories," the message began. "I extend my greetings and my respect for your safe return from the mining world. I have studied the records of your guardian's actions during the separatist attack. Captain Morrison's display of loyalty and courage has captured my attention, and I believe it may hold answers to questions that have troubled my people for centuries." Jake felt uncomfortable being talked about, like he was some kind of scientific specimen. "She makes it sound like I'm a lab rat she wants to study. I formally request that Captain Morrison visit my capital world as an honored guest of the Cytherian Empire," the Queen's message continued. There are matters of great importance that I wish to discuss with him, matters that may affect the future of multiple civilizations. Time is of great importance in this request." When the message ended, Jake and Princess Lyra sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Jake spoke. "What do you think she really wants?" Princess Lyra had been thinking the same thing. She had studied galactic politics her entire life, and she knew that Queen Zarina never did anything without multiple layers of meaning. "The Catherians are facing some kind of crisis. They wouldn't ask for outside help unless their own resources were insufficient." "What kind of crisis could threaten people who can live forever and have technology beyond our understanding?" "I don't know," Princess Lyra admitted, "but I think you should go find out." Jake was quiet for a long time. He had sworn an oath to protect the princess, and that oath didn't have an expiration date. But he also understood that sometimes protecting one person meant helping many people. If Queen Zarina was right, and his actions could somehow help entire civilizations, didn't he have a duty to answer her call? 2 days later, Jake found himself aboard a Catherian diplomatic vessel that had arrived to escort him to the capital world. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. The walls seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The gravity felt perfect, and the air tasted like mountain springs. Everything was beautiful, but Jake felt like he was inside a work of art rather than a real spacecraft. The Catherian crew members were tall and elegant, with skin that shifted through subtle colors like oil on water. They treated Jake with polite respect, but he could see the curiosity in their large, dark eyes. They had probably never met a human before, and they certainly had never met one who was famous throughout the galaxy. The journey to Nexus Prime took 5 days, during which Jake learned more about the Catherians than most beings knew. Captain Veltara, the ship's commander, explained that her people had achieved biological immortality 3,000 years ago. They no longer aged or died from disease. They had eliminated hunger, poverty, and physical suffering from their civilization. "It sounds perfect," Jake said during one of their conversations. "In many ways, it is," Captain Veltara agreed. "We have accomplished everything our ancestors dreamed of. We have conquered time, space, and death itself. But—" Jake sensed there was more to the story. "But we have lost something in the process, something that the recordings of your battle showed us we are missing." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We no longer know how to truly care for each other. We protect our people because it is logical and efficient, not because we feel compelled to do so. We have forgotten what it means to love something more than our own existence." Jake was beginning to understand why Queen Zarina had summoned him. The Catherians had achieved perfection, but perfection apparently came with a price. Nexus Prime was the most beautiful world Jake had ever seen. The capital city rose from crystal foundations in spiraling towers that reached toward the clouds. Gardens floated in the air between buildings, connected by bridges of solid light. The technology was so advanced that it seemed like magic, but Jake noticed something important. Despite all the beauty and wonder, the Catherian people seemed somehow empty. They moved through their perfect city with calm efficiency, but Jake never saw anyone laugh or cry or show any strong emotion. They spoke in quiet, measured tones and treated each other with polite respect, but there was no warmth in their interactions. It was like watching beautiful robots pretending to be alive. Queen Zarina received Jake in her throne room, a vast chamber where holographic displays showed the status of thousands of worlds across her empire. She was the most striking being Jake had ever encountered. Her skin shifted through colors like the aurora borealis, and her eyes held the depth of centuries. She was beautiful beyond description, but there was something almost tragic about her perfection. "Captain Morrison," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that Jake felt in his bones. Thank you for accepting my invitation. Your actions on Kepler 442b have created ripples throughout the galaxy that you may not fully understand. Jake stood at attention, unsure of the proper protocol for addressing a 1,000-year-old alien queen. Your Majesty, I'm honored by your invitation, but I'm not sure what I can offer someone of your knowledge and experience. Queen Zarina gestured to a chair that seemed to grow from the crystal floor. Please, sit. What you can offer is something my people have forgotten how to do. You can show us how to fight for something greater than ourselves. She activated the holographic displays, showing Jake images of destroyed worlds and burning space stations. We face an enemy called the Void Collective, a hive-mind civilization that consumes entire star systems to fuel its expansion. They grow stronger with every world they devour, and they are moving toward the heart of our empire. Jake studied the tactical displays. The Void Collective forces looked like something from a nightmare, biomechanical creatures that adapted to every weapon used against them. Your technology seems far superior to theirs. Why haven't you been able to stop them? Because we fight with our minds, not our hearts, Queen Zarina admitted. We calculate odds and minimize losses. We retreat when logic suggests that victory is unlikely. We protect our valuable resources instead of fighting for worthless ground. And they don't? The Void Collective fights with absolute dedication to their collective goal. They sacrifice anything and everything to achieve victory. Individual units mean nothing to them. They will throw away 1,000,000 soldiers to gain one strategic advantage. Jake was beginning to see the problem. The Catherians were too rational, too logical. They fought like computers calculating the most efficient outcome. But wars weren't won by the most logical army. They were won by the army that wanted victory more than they feared death. You want me to teach your people how to fight like humans, Jake said. I want you to teach them how to care about something more than their own survival, Queen Zarina corrected. I want you to show them what you showed the galaxy on Kepler 442b, that some things are worth any sacrifice. Jake looked around the perfect throne room with its displays showing an empire of impossible beauty and wealth. Then he thought about the ugly mining world where he had nearly died protecting one alien princess. The choice seemed obvious. When do we start? Jake's training program began with 50 of the Catherian Empire's finest warriors. They gathered in a vast combat facility beneath the capital city, a place where holographic projections could create any battlefield imaginable. The Catherian soldiers were impressive specimens, tall and graceful with enhanced reflexes and tactical implants that allowed them to process information faster than any human mind. But Jake saw their weakness immediately. They fought like a computer program, following optimal strategies and minimizing risk. When he ran combat simulations with them, they retreated whenever casualties mounted above acceptable levels. They valued efficiency over effectiveness, preservation over victory. Your tactics are perfect, Jake told Commander Thexani after their third training session. Too perfect. You fight like you're afraid to lose something. We are immortal, the commander replied. Each of us represents centuries of accumulated knowledge and experience. Losing a soldier is like destroying a library. That's your problem right there, Jake said. You think like immortals. You fight like you have all the time in the universe to find the perfect solution. But sometimes there is no perfect solution. Sometimes you just have to accept the pain and push through it. Jake redesigned their training from the ground up. Instead of tactical simulations, he created scenarios where the Catherian warriors had to choose between personal safety and protecting others. He put them in situations where the only winning move required sacrifice. The results were mixed. Some of the warriors began to understand what Jake was teaching. They started making decisions based on emotional connection rather than logical calculation. But others struggled with the concept of choosing suffering when alternatives existed. It goes against everything we have learned, admitted Lieutenant Zarath. one of the more promising students. Our entire civilization is built on the principle of minimizing pain and maximizing pleasure. You are asking us to choose pain voluntarily. I'm asking you to choose meaning, Jake corrected. Pain has a purpose when it's for something bigger than yourself. The hurt you feel when you sacrifice for others is what makes you alive. 3 weeks into the training program, Jake received troubling news from Queen Zarina. The Void Collective had accelerated their advance, destroying 3 more star systems in rapid succession. The Catherian forces defending those regions had fought well, but they had retreated when losses became too high, abandoning millions of civilians to save their military assets. "We need more time," Queen Zarina told Jake during one of their private meetings. "Our people are learning, but change comes slowly to those who have lived for centuries." Jake studied the tactical reports from the fallen worlds. The pattern was always the same. Catherian forces would engage the Void Collective with superior technology and initial success. But when the enemy adapted and casualties mounted, they would withdraw to more defensible positions. It was logical, efficient, and ultimately useless. "Time is one thing we don't have," Jake said. "These Void Collective creatures learn from every battle. The longer this war goes on, the stronger they become. You need to hit them hard and fast, before they can adapt." "That would require enormous casualties," the Queen pointed out. "We would lose thousands of warriors in a single engagement." "Better than losing thousands of worlds," Jake replied. The test came sooner than anyone expected. Long-range sensors detected a massive Void Collective fleet moving towards Sanctuary 7th, a Catherian colony world with over 10 million civilians. The planet's defenses were strong, but not strong enough to stop the incoming armada. Evacuation was impossible given the time constraints. Queen Zarina's military advisors recommended the standard response: engage the enemy with the fleet, inflict maximum damage while minimizing losses, then conduct a fighting retreat to draw the Void forces away from populated areas. It was a sound strategy that had worked many times before. Jake had a different idea. "We don't retreat. We make our stand at Sanctuary 7th and we hold the line no matter what it costs us." "That would be suicide," General Korath objected. "Our fleet analysis shows we would lose 60% of our forces in such an engagement." "And if we retreat? How many civilians die?" Jake asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Catherian commanders looked at their tactical displays, calculating probabilities and casualty estimates. They were thinking like immortals again, weighing the value of preserving their forces against the cost of losing territory. Queen Zarina made the decision that changed everything. "We follow Captain Morrison's plan. No retreat, no surrender. We hold Sanctuary 7, or we die trying." The battle fleet that assembled around Sanctuary 7th was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Catherian warships hung in space like floating cities, their crystal hulls reflecting the light of the system's twin suns. But for the first time in centuries, they were not planning to retreat if the battle turned against them. Jake stood on the bridge of the flagship alongside Queen Zarina as the Void Collective armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. The enemy ships looked like they had been grown rather than built, organic curves and biomechanical appendages that pulsed with alien life. There were hundreds of them, each one adapted specifically to counter Catherian technology. "They outnumber us 3-1, reported the tactical officer. "Good," Jake said. "That means we won't run out of targets." The opening phase of the battle went exactly as expected. Catherian forces engaged the enemy at maximum range, using their superior weapons technology to destroy dozens of Void ships before they could close to effective firing distance. But the enemy adapted quickly, modifying their ship designs in real time to counter the Catherian weapons. As the battle progressed and casualties mounted, Jake watched the Catherian commanders for signs of the old thinking. He saw it in their eyes when losses reached 10%, then 20%. The logical part of their minds was screaming at them to retreat, to preserve their forces for another battle. But they held their positions. Commander Thexani, who had trained with Jake for weeks, was the first to make the crucial choice. When his ship's weapons failed and enemy boarders swarmed his vessel, he didn't abandon ship. Instead, he set the reactor to overload and took 30 void ships with him when it exploded. His sacrifice inspired others. Lieutenant Zarath rammed her damaged cruiser into a void collective mothership, destroying both vessels, but saving a convoy of civilian transports. Captain Veltara held the line against impossible odds until enemy fire finally overwhelmed her shields, but not before she had bought precious time for reinforcements to arrive. For the first time in their history, the Catherians fought like humans. They chose meaning over survival, sacrifice over preservation. They discovered what Jake had tried to teach them, that some things were worth dying for. The battle lasted 12 hours and cost the Catherian fleet 40% of its ships. But when it was over, Sanctuary 7 was still free, and the Void Collective Armada was nothing but debris floating in space. More importantly, the Catherians had learned something about themselves that they had forgotten during their long evolution toward perfection. Queen Zarina found Jake in the medical bay after the battle, where he was being treated for injuries sustained when the flagship took heavy damage. He was alive, but barely. Fighting alongside immortals had not made him immortal. "You did it," she said, her voice carrying emotions that her people had not felt for centuries. "You showed us what we had lost. You gave us back our ability to care about something more than ourselves." Jake managed a weak smile. "No, Your Majesty. You already had it. You just needed to remember how to use it." As he lay there, surrounded by the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy, Jake thought about Princess Lyra and the promise he had made to protect her. He had kept that promise, but he had also done something more. He had helped an entire civilization remember what it meant to be alive. The victory at Sanctuary 7 should have been the end of the war, but the Void Collective had one final surprise. Deep space monitors detected an enormous fleet gathering in the dark regions between star systems, a force 10 times larger than anything seen before. The hive mind had been holding back its true strength, waiting for the right moment to strike. Their target was not a military installation or strategic resource. The Void Collective was moving toward Earth itself, humanity's home world. Intelligence reports suggested they had studied the battle recordings from Jake's fight on Kepler 442b and identified humans as the source of the new tactical philosophy spreading through the galaxy. They intended to eliminate the problem at its source. Jake was still recovering from his injuries when the news arrived. The Catherian medical technology had healed his body, but some wounds went deeper than flesh and bone. He had pushed himself beyond all limits too many times, and even human determination had its breaking points. "You can't be serious about this," Queen Zarina said when Jake announced his intention to return to Earth. "You are in no condition to fight another battle. Let my people handle this threat." Jake was sitting up in the medical bay reading tactical reports on a datapad. The numbers were sobering. The Void Collective fleet heading toward Earth was larger than the entire Catherian navy. Even with their new willingness to sacrifice, Queen Zarina's forces would be overwhelmed. "Your people learned how to fight for something bigger than themselves," Jake said. "But this is my world, my people. If the Void Collective wants to threaten Earth, they have to go through me first." Word of the threat to Earth spread quickly through human space. Captain Amy Carter, a demolitions expert from the Mars colonies, was the first to volunteer for the defense fleet. She had studied the recordings of Jake's battle and understood what needed to be done. Marcus Webb, a medical officer from the Jupiter mining stations, soon followed. Then came Lisa Grant, a transport pilot who had spent years flying supplies to frontier worlds. Within days, Thousands of humans were arriving at Earth to join the defense effort. They came from every colony world, every space station, every corner of human civilization. Most were not trained soldiers. They were miners, farmers, engineers, doctors, teachers. But they all understood something that the galaxy was just beginning to learn. When someone threatens your family, you fight. The assembled fleet was a strange sight. Sleek Catherian warships floated alongside battered human cargo haulers that had been hastily fitted with weapons. Valdorian medical ships worked to support both fleets. Representatives from dozens of species had come to join the battle, each bringing their unique capabilities to the fight. Jake took command of the human contingent from the bridge of an old cargo ship called Liberty's Dream. It wasn't much to look at compared to the magnificent alien vessels, but it was human-built and human-crewed, and that meant something to the people who would have to fight in it. "All ships, this is Morrison," Jake broadcast to the assembled fleet. "We're not here to win a pretty victory or preserve our forces for the next battle. We're here to make sure Earth survives this day, no matter what it costs us. Anyone who isn't prepared to give everything for that goal should leave now." No one left. The Void Collective fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a plague of locusts. Their ships had evolved since the last battle, growing larger and more aggressive. Some were the size of asteroids, covered in weapons that pulsed with organic energy. Others moved like living creatures, tentacles writhing as they searched for prey. The battle began at the orbit of Neptune, where the human-Catherian alliance had set up their first defensive line. The fighting was fierce from the very start. Void ships adapted to every weapon used against them, growing new armor and developing new tactics in real time. But the defenders had something the enemy couldn't adapt to: the willingness to die for each other. Amy Carter piloted her demolition ship directly into the reactor core of a Void mothership, detonating her entire payload while still inside the enemy vessel. The explosion took out 12 smaller ships as well, but Amy was vaporized in the blast. Her last transmission was a cheerful, "Tell my mom I said hello." Marcus Webb's medical ship was cut in half by enemy fire, but he kept working to evacuate wounded crews even as his ship broke apart around him. He saved 43 people before the hull finally collapsed, and his body was found still trying to reach a trapped pilot. Lisa Grant flew suicide missions against Void command ships, using her unarmed transport to deliver Marines directly onto enemy vessels. She completed 7 such missions before enemy fire finally caught up with her. Her ship was destroyed while ramming a Void carrier, taking the enemy flagship with it. The battle raged for 3 days as the defensive lines slowly fell back toward Earth. Each human who died bought time for others to escape, each sacrifice weakening the enemy advance. The Catherians fought with newfound passion, inspired by human examples of courage. Other alien species contributed their own unique strengths to the battle, but it was not enough. The Void Collective was too large, too adaptable, too determined. By the end of the second day, the Alliance fleet was down to a few dozen ships, and the enemy was already entering Earth's atmosphere. Jake made the final decision from the bridge of Liberty's Dream as Void landing craft began descending toward Earth's major cities. His ship was heavily damaged, life support was failing, and most of his crew was either dead or wounded. But he still had one option left. "All remaining ships, this is Morrison," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We're going to ram the main Void ship, full speed, everything you've got. It's been an honor serving with all of you." The suicide charge that followed became legend throughout the galaxy. 37 ships, human and alien alike, accelerated toward the massive Void mothership that hung over Earth like a metal moon. Most were destroyed by defensive fire before they could reach their target, but enough got through. Jake's ship was among the last to hit. Liberty's Dream struck the enemy vessel's command section at nearly the speed of light, punching through armor that had withstood every other weapon. The explosion that followed could be seen from Mars. When the light faded, the Void mothership was gone. Without central coordination, the remaining Void forces fell into chaos. Scattered enemy units were quickly hunted down by surviving Alliance ships and Earth's orbital defenses. The threat was over. Jake Morrison died in that final explosion, along with most of the human volunteers who had come to defend Earth. But their sacrifice saved not just one world, but an entire galaxy. The Void Collective, faced with enemies who chose death over surrender, finally understood that they could not win through adaptation alone. Queen Zarina established the Morrison Academy on a crystal moon orbiting Nexus Prime. Students from every known civilization came to study human concepts of loyalty, sacrifice, and love. They learned that strength came not from superior technology or tactical advantage, but from the willingness to give everything for others. Princess Lyra commissioned a monument on Earth bearing Jake's final words. The simple stone memorial became a pilgrimage site for beings throughout the galaxy who wanted to understand what it meant to be human. The inscription read, "Some things are worth fighting for. Some things are worth dying for. Love is what makes us choose." The war with the Void Collective ended not because one side was stronger than the other, but because humanity had taught the galaxy something the hive mind could not counter: the power of individuals who choose to act as one. The enemy's collective intelligence was no match for free beings who fought together by choice rather than compulsion. In the years that followed, Earth became the diplomatic center of a new galactic alliance, not because humans were the strongest or smartest species, but because they had shown everyone else how to care about something bigger than themselves. The lesson Jake Morrison had learned on the streets of New Detroit, that protecting others was more important than protecting yourself, became the foundation of interstellar civilization. And somewhere in the databanks of a dozen different species, the recordings of a single human fighting impossible odds to protect one alien princess continued to inspire new generations of beings who understood that courage was not about being unafraid. It was about being afraid and choosing to act anyway. The human who had taken every blow for a princess had given the galaxy its greatest gift: the knowledge that love was stronger than death, that sacrifice created meaning, and that some things truly were worth everything.